Another federal court has rejected the Trump administration's move to install a U.S. attorney. An appeals court determined that President Donald Trump's former personal lawyer, Alina Habba, was unlawfully appointed as the top federal prosecutor in New Jersey. The three-judge panel's decision was unanimous, and Habba was disqualified from supervising cases. It was the latest blow to Trump and his Justice Department as they seek to install loyalists. Last week, a federal judge found that the Trump-aligned prosecutor Lindsay Halligan had been unlawfully appointed as interim U.S. attorney for the Eastern District of Virginia. That was part of a decision in which criminal cases brought against two high-profile Trump adversaries, former FBI Director James Comey and New York State Attorney General Letitia James, were dismissed. In the Alina Habba case, the appeals court upheld the lower court's ruling in August that the Trump administration violated a federal appointments law in naming Habba as acting U.S. attorney in New Jersey.
All right, crew. Adam speaking time to get loud. A federal judge exploded in court, confronting Trump's attorneys with, "You lied to me. You misled this court. You withheld documents." The moment destroyed their credibility, opening the door to sanctions, contempt, and potential criminal exposure for perjury. The date was November 8, 2025, and what happened in that courtroom was absolutely explosive. Trump's lawyers walked in thinking they were going to have some routine hearing, some normal legal argument about what they had or hadn't turned over in discovery, which is just a standard part of litigation. They probably expected to make their arguments, listen to the other side's arguments, and leave with some minor rulings that wouldn't significantly affect their case. But the judge was prepared. The judge had done extensive homework ahead of time. The judge understood exactly what Trump's lawyers had claimed they had turned over, and what they had actually turned over to the opposing side. And there were massive discrepancies that could not be explained away.
We're following a developing story involving yet another one of President Trump's U.S. attorneys. A federal appeals court ruled that Alina Habba, the president's former personal attorney, is unlawfully serving as the U.S. attorney in New Jersey. It's the same reason a federal judge in Virginia dismissed the Justice Department's cases against James Comey and Letitia James. CNN's Caitlin Polantz is following the story. Seeing a pattern here, Caitlin.
There is a bit of a pattern. The big picture is that the appeals court today, now this is appeals court that only applies to Delaware, Pennsylvania, New Jersey, and the U.S. Virgin Islands, of course. What they are saying is that the Justice Department, the Trump administration, they can't do a runaround of Congress if there's somebody that is nominated to one of these U.S. attorney positions and then doesn't get confirmed by the Senate. That's what happened with Habba. Then the Trump administration tried to stick her in through sort of the back door, the career door of that U.S. attorney's office to elevate her into the role. They said, that's not right.
Documents that should have been produced were completely missing. Communications that were supposed to be turned over were nowhere in the production. Evidence that the lawyers had claimed they possessed didn't match up with what they had actually provided. When the judge started asking questions about these discrepancies, when the judge started demanding explanations for where specific documents were and why they hadn't been produced, it became clear very quickly that something was deeply wrong. The lawyers were stammering. They were offering vague excuses. They were contradicting themselves. They were trying to explain away inconsistencies that could not be explained. And then the judge figured it out. They had lied. They had misled the court about what evidence they possessed. They had withheld documents intentionally or through reckless disregard for their obligations. They had given false statements about what they had produced.
A blow to the Trump administration today after an appeals court upheld a ruling that disqualifies one of his appointees. And you'll recall that Alina Habba used to be one of President Trump's personal lawyers. He made her the acting U.S. attorney for New Jersey, despite her having no prior experience as a criminal prosecutor. The Court of Appeals has now ruled that the, quote, citizens of New Jersey and employees of the U.S. Attorney's Office deserve clarity and stability. And it all came to a head after a New Jersey man facing drug trafficking and firearm charges moved to dismiss his indictment in July, arguing that Habba was appointed unlawfully. Habba's office, the Justice Department, and the White House did not immediately respond to NBC's request for comment.
The judge absolutely lost it. I mean, truly erupted in anger. This wasn't a controlled judicial admonishment. This was a full-scale explosion of fury directed at the lawyers sitting in the courtroom. The judge confronted Trump's lawyers directly about their dishonesty, their misconduct, their complete failure to uphold the standards of the legal profession. And as the hearing continued and the lawyers started admitting under questioning that yes, they had withheld documents, and yes, they had misled the court, and yes, they had made false statements, the judge started talking about real consequences. Not just warnings, not just stern lectures, real, tangible, devastating consequences. Sanctions that could cost hundreds of thousands of dollars. Possible arrest orders for contempt of court. Criminal exposure for perjury. The judge made absolutely clear that this wasn't some minor issue that could be overlooked or excused or handled quietly behind closed doors.
I don't know how to try this case, Your Honor. Imagine sitting in a courtroom and hearing the lawyer who you are paying say, I don't know how to try this case, Your Honor. Donald Trump heard his lawyer say that in the opening minutes of the case of E. Jean Carroll versus Donald J. Trump in federal court today in New York. Federal Judge Lewis Kaplan had ruled against the Trump lawyers in a series of objections with quick one-word rulings, overruled repeatedly. When every one of the Trump lawyers' pretrial objections was overruled, attorney Alina Habba said, I don't know how to try this case, Your Honor, to which the judge said, I have heard you, I have considered what you have to say, and I have ruled. That's it. In my courtroom, when the ruling is made, that is the end, not the beginning of argument. And that leaves Alina Habba as the current frontrunner for worst Trump lawyer to appear in court so far.
Think about the magnitude of what just happened in that moment. A federal judge has now seen Trump's lawyers lying in open court in front of everybody. The judge has documentation of it. It is in the court record. It is permanent. It is not going away. It is not something that can be fixed by apologizing or by claiming it was a mistake. Every single thing Trump's lawyers say to that judge going forward is going to be met with extreme skepticism and suspicion. The judge is going to fact-check everything they claim. The judge is going to verify everything they present as evidence. The judge is not going to give them the benefit of the doubt anymore because the judge now knows with certainty that Trump's lawyers are willing to lie under oath. The judge knows that Trump's lawyers will mislead the court to protect their client. The judge knows that Trump's legal team cannot be trusted. This completely changes the dynamic of how that case is going to proceed from this moment forward. It destroys the credibility of Trump's entire legal team in that courtroom. It undermines every argument they are going to make. It poisons the well for everything they are going to do going forward. Think about what that means in practical terms. Think about what happens when a judge loses trust in your lawyers and decides they are dishonest. Think about what happens when a judge concludes that your legal team is willing to lie under oath to the court. Think about what happens when you have lost all credibility with the person who is actually going to decide your case. Every motion you file from that point forward is going to be examined with extreme scrutiny and suspicion. Every statement you make in court is going to be fact-checked by the judge independently. Every document you produce is going to be verified to make sure you are not lying again. You have basically poisoned your ability to effectively represent your client because the judge no longer believes anything you say. And not only that, but the judge is now actively considering sanctions, which could mean huge fines, could mean suspension of your law license, could mean criminal charges for perjury for lying under oath. This is serious stuff. This is career-destroying stuff. This is the kind of moment that ruins lawyers and destroys their ability to practice law. And here is what makes this moment even bigger and even more significant. This is not an isolated incident. This is not just one hearing, where one judge caught one set of Trump's lawyers lying. This is part of a documented pattern that has been building for years. Law professors are talking about how Trump-connected lawyers are being called out by judges nationwide for lying to courts consistently. Judges in multiple different jurisdictions are sanctioning Trump-aligned attorneys for false statements and for misconduct. Lawyers involved in Trump cases are facing actual criminal charges for forgery and for their involvement in various schemes. Journalists and legal analysts are starting to notice and document that when Trump's legal team shows up in court, they consistently seem to get caught making false statements or hiding evidence or misleading judges. That is not a coincidence. That is a pattern. That is a systemic problem with Trump's legal operation. And it is destroying the credibility of anyone willing to represent Trump in court, because judges are starting to assume that Trump's lawyers will lie. It is like a reputation that precedes you. Except in this case, the reputation is for dishonesty and misconduct and a complete disregard for the obligations that lawyers owe to the court. The damage is not limited to one case or one jurisdiction. It spreads across the entire legal system. Every judge who sees Trump's lawyers walking into their courtroom knows about the pattern. Every judge who hears that Trump is being represented by a particular attorney has heard about the sanctions and the discipline and the misconduct allegations. And that means every judge is going to be watching Trump's lawyers more closely, scrutinizing their statements more carefully, and being much less willing to give them the benefit of the doubt. The hearing itself was supposed to be about discovery, which is the basic process where each side turns over evidence and documents to the other side. Discovery is routine. It is required by law. It is how the legal system works. But the judge had apparently done some investigation before the hearing and had looked into what Trump's lawyers claimed they had turned over versus what they actually turned over in the discovery process. There was a significant and damaging discrepancy. Documents that Trump's lawyers said they did not have or said they had already produced were actually missing from the production. Evidence that was supposed to be turned over had not been turned over. Statements that Trump's lawyers made about what they had turned out to be false when the judge looked into it. That is when everything exploded. The judge started asking pointed questions. Where is this document? Where is that evidence? What about this communication that we know exists? And as Trump's lawyers tried to answer the judge's questions, tried to explain the discrepancies, it became clear very quickly that they did not have good answers. They could not explain why documents were missing. They could not explain why their statements about what they had turned over did not match the actual record. They could not explain the lies. At some point during the questioning, the judge figured out that Trump's lawyers were being deliberately dishonest. They were lying. They were making false statements under oath. They were deliberately withholding evidence or at least being completely dishonest about what they had produced. And that is when the judge erupted. That is when everything went crazy in that courtroom. Can you even imagine being a federal judge, someone who has dedicated their entire career to the pursuit of justice and the rule of law, and realizing that the lawyers standing before you are lying directly to your face under oath, right there in your courtroom? Can you imagine the anger and the fury that produces when you realize you have been deliberately misled? Can you imagine how that destroys any confidence or trust you might have had in those lawyers? That is exactly what happened. The judge got angry. The judge got furious. The judge confronted Trump's lawyers directly and demanded to know how they could explain their conduct. And apparently, as the judge continued questioning them and pressing them, Trump's lawyers started admitting under that pressure that yes, they had withheld documents from the other side. Yes, they had misled the court about what they had. Yes, they had made false statements under oath. They essentially confessed to the misconduct right there in the courtroom in front of everybody while being recorded and documented. Once they admitted to the misconduct, once they confessed to lying and hiding evidence, the judge's tone changed completely. The judge got even more serious. The judge got even more angry. The judge started talking about real consequences, sanctions that could cost hundreds of thousands of dollars, possible arrest orders for contempt of court or for perjury for lying under oath. The judge made it absolutely clear that this was not some minor issue that could be overlooked or excused or handled quietly behind closed doors. This was serious judicial misconduct allegations against Trump's attorneys. This was potential criminal exposure for lying under oath in federal court. This was a situation where people could actually go to jail. And Trump's lawyers were sitting there realizing that they had just completely destroyed their own credibility and potentially exposed themselves to serious criminal liability and career-ending consequences. Think about what happens in a case when the judge has decided that your lawyers are liars. Think about the practical implications of that decision for how the case is going to proceed. Every single thing your legal team says going forward is going to be treated with extreme suspicion by the judge. When your lawyers make legal arguments, the judge is going to fact-check those arguments independently, instead of just accepting them. When your lawyers file motions with the court, the judge is going to scrutinize every word carefully, instead of giving them the benefit of the doubt. When your lawyers say they have documents or evidence, the judge is going to verify it independently, instead of just taking their word for it. You have basically crippled your ability to defend your case effectively, because the judge does not trust you anymore, and probably does not believe anything you say. And not only that, but now you are facing potential sanctions that could cost huge amounts of money. Now you are facing potential criminal charges for perjury. Now you are facing the possibility that these lawyers could lose their law licenses and never practice law again. This is career-destroying stuff. This is the kind of moment that changes lives and ruins reputations in the legal profession. And here is what is really significant and important about this moment. This is not happening in isolation somewhere in a vacuum. This is part of a much bigger pattern of Trump-connected lawyers getting caught lying to courts across the entire country in multiple jurisdictions. Law professors have been studying this pattern and tracking it, and pointing out publicly that Trump-aligned attorneys are being called out by judges nationwide for making false statements. There are multiple instances documented of judges sanctioning Trump's lawyers for serious misconduct. Trump-connected attorneys in Wisconsin have faced actual criminal charges for forgery and for their involvement in fake elector schemes. Attorneys who worked on Trump's behalf in Georgia have faced sanctions and bar discipline for their conduct. DOJ attorneys who worked under Trump's leadership have been caught making false statements to judges and getting called out for it in open court. There is this consistent pattern across the country where Trump's legal team is getting caught lying and judges are responding with increasing severity. So you have this documented pattern where Trump's legal team across multiple different jurisdictions in multiple different cases is consistently being caught lying to courts and misleading judges. And judges are absolutely not tolerating it anymore. Judges are confronting it directly. Judges are imposing sanctions. Judges are considering criminal referrals to the Justice Department. That tells you something important and significant about how the legal system is responding to Trump's legal operation. The legal system is pushing back. The legal system is holding Trump's team accountable. The legal system is making clear that lying to courts is not acceptable. Even if you are representing a sitting president, even if you are representing the most powerful person in the country, you still cannot lie under oath. You still cannot mislead judges. You still cannot hide evidence. The rules apply to everyone equally. This is a fundamental principle of the American legal system. No one is above the law, and that includes the lawyers who represent the most powerful people in the country. What is connecting to all of this is Trump's broader assault on the legal profession and on lawyers in general. Trump has issued directives and executive memos and orders that are seen by legal experts as attempts to intimidate lawyers and law firms. Trump is targeting attorneys who he views as hostile to his interests. Trump is going after law firms that have represented people who oppose him or who have prosecuted cases against Trump and his allies. Trump is essentially declaring war on the legal profession and saying, if you do not support me, or if you represent my enemies, or if you prosecute my people, you are going to pay the price. This is an unprecedented attack on the independence of the legal profession and the judiciary. This is Trump trying to use his presidential power to intimidate the bar and silence lawyers who will not bend completely to his will. The legal community is responding with genuine concern and alarm. Lawyers understand that they could be targeted by the president simply for doing their jobs. Lawyers understand that the independence of the legal profession is under direct assault from the highest office in the land. And lawyers are beginning to speak out publicly about the danger that this poses to the rule of law and to democracy itself. But there is also a sense of resolve. There is a sense that the legal profession will not be intimidated. There is a sense that lawyers will continue to do their jobs and represent their clients and uphold their obligations to the court, regardless of the personal risk. This is where the story gets even more significant because it is not just about one hearing or one judge or one set of lawyers. It is about the entire legal system pushing back against a president who is trying to undermine its independence and its integrity. The judge in the November 8th hearing was not just angry about the specific misconduct that had occurred in that case. The judge was also reacting to a broader pattern of behavior that has become all too familiar in cases involving Trump and his associates. The judge was frustrated by the repeated instances of dishonesty and evasion and obstruction that have characterized so many of Trump's legal battles. The judge was making a statement that went beyond the specific facts of that hearing. The judge was saying to Trump's lawyers and to anyone else who might be tempted to follow their example that lying to courts will not be tolerated and that there will be consequences for those who choose to disregard their obligations as officers of the court. The practical implications of this hearing for Trump's legal defense are devastating and far-reaching. Every single motion that Trump's lawyers file in that case, from this point forward, will be viewed with extreme suspicion by the judge. Every argument they make will be scrutinized and fact-checked. Every piece of evidence they present will be verified. The judge has essentially lost all trust in Trump's legal team, and that loss of trust will color every aspect of how the case proceeds. This is not the kind of disadvantage that can be overcome by better arguments or more evidence. This is a fundamental problem with the credibility of the legal team itself. And credibility is everything in litigation. Without credibility, you cannot persuade a judge. Without credibility, you cannot effectively represent your client. Without credibility, your legal position becomes almost untenable. The sanctions that the judge is now considering could be absolutely devastating. Monetary sanctions in the hundreds of thousands or even millions of dollars are not uncommon in cases where lawyers have been found to have intentionally withheld evidence or misled the court. These sanctions are meant to punish the misconduct and to deter others from engaging in similar behavior. They can also include non-monetary penalties, such as orders restricting what the lawyers can do in the case. A judge can say, "You cannot file motions without having them reviewed by an independent attorney first." A judge can say, "Every document you produce has to be verified by someone else." A judge can essentially tie the hands of Trump's legal team and prevent them from doing their jobs effectively. Beyond sanctions, there is also the very real possibility of criminal charges. Lying under oath in federal court is perjury, which is a federal crime. It can result in criminal prosecution and imprisonment. Trump's lawyers are now potentially facing serious criminal exposure for lying in that hearing. They could be referred to the Justice Department for prosecution. They could be indicted. They could be convicted and sent to prison. This is not an abstract possibility. This is a concrete threat that is hanging over their heads. And that threat is going to affect everything they do going forward. They are going to be more cautious. They are going to be more careful. They are going to be more fearful of making any statement that could be construed as false. But that caution may not be enough to protect them because the judge now knows that they are willing to lie and is going to be watching them closely. The pattern of Trump-connected lawyers being caught lying to courts is not going to stop with this one hearing. More hearings will happen. More judges will catch more lawyers making false statements. More sanctions will be imposed. More criminal referrals will be made. This is a systemic problem with Trump's legal operation, and it is not going to be resolved by one judge's anger or one set of sanctions. The culture of dishonesty that has been allowed to develop within Trump's legal team is going to continue to produce misconduct, and the legal system is going to continue to respond with increasing severity. This is going to make it harder and harder for Trump to mount effective legal defenses. His lawyers are going to be increasingly constrained by the courts. His cases are going to be increasingly difficult to win. His overall legal position is going to become increasingly untenable. Trump's attack on the legal profession is going to continue as well. He is going to keep issuing directives and executive orders that target lawyers and law firms. He is going to keep trying to intimidate the bar and silence his critics. But the legal profession is pushing back. Judges are pushing back. Lawyers are pushing back. The system is defending itself against Trump's assault. And that resistance is going to make it harder for Trump to actually carry out his threats against lawyers and law firms. The legal profession is not going to be intimidated. The legal profession is not going to bend to Trump's will. The legal profession is going to continue to uphold its obligations to the court and to the rule of law. And that means Trump is going to continue to face legal challenges that he cannot easily overcome. The ultimate significance of the November 8th hearing is that it represents a turning point in Trump's relationship with the legal system. For years, Trump and his lawyers have been able to operate with relative impunity. They have been able to make false statements, withhold evidence, and mislead courts without facing serious consequences. But that era is ending. Judges are no longer tolerating the misconduct. Judges are imposing real sanctions. Judges are referring lawyers for criminal prosecution. The legal system is finally holding Trump's team accountable. And that accountability is going to have profound consequences for Trump's ability to defend himself in court and for the overall integrity of the legal system. The American legal system is based on trust. Judges trust lawyers to tell the truth. Lawyers trust judges to be fair. The entire system depends on that mutual trust and respect. When that trust is broken, the system breaks down. Trump's lawyers have broken that trust repeatedly, and the consequences are now being felt. They have lost the trust of judges. They have lost their credibility. They have lost their ability to function effectively as lawyers in many courts. And that loss of trust and credibility is going to follow them for the rest of their careers. They will never again be able to walk into a courtroom with the presumption of honesty that normally accompanies an officer of the court. They will always be viewed with suspicion. They will always be scrutinized more closely than other lawyers. They have permanently damaged their reputations and their ability to practice law. The broader implications for Trump himself are equally significant. His legal team is now compromised. His ability to mount effective defenses is now impaired. His chances of winning his legal battles are now diminished. The legal system is pushing back against him and his team, and that pushback is only going to intensify as more judges catch more lawyers lying and impose more sanctions. Trump is running out of legal options. He is running out of effective legal representation. And he is running out of time. The walls are closing in, and the legal system is finally holding him accountable. The November 8th hearing was a turning point. It was the moment when a federal judge looked at Trump's lawyers and said, "Enough." It was the moment when the consequences for lying to courts became real and tangible and devastating. And it was the moment when the legal profession began to fight back against Trump's assault on its independence and integrity. The November 8th hearing sent a clear message. Lying to courts, misleading judges, and hiding evidence will not be tolerated. The legal system is pushing back, and consequences for Trump and his team will continue to mount. The rule of law is still fighting.